Okay, so we are gonna go, we're gonna do, guys, we're gonna do the acceptance is the answer story in the back. It's
407.
407. It's my second favorite story to do. I really like that other one we did the other day, but I really also really like this one. And I really want you guys to pay attention, because you know how I always say that denial is the worst part of this disease, like the lies we tell ourselves, or the denial that don't even know we're lying and stuff like that. This guy's a doctor, and wait till you see how far the denial is. Wait till you see how crazy it is with him. And I like the way he tells the story, because he goes almost like back and forth. It's a really good story. And then this is where the acceptance prayer comes from, and we'll also be reading that. And all right, and anybody, feel free to jump in and share and talk about anything, or if anything strikes you, let me know. Jacob's going to read for us again, and we're going to do this now, finish up at 6, dinner at 5, and then, you guys can party like rock stars and do, I don't really care what you do as long as you're not doing what you're really not supposed to do, I'm okay with that. So go ahead.
All right. Acceptance was the answer. The physician wasn't hooked, he thought. He just prescribed drugs medically indicated for his many ailments. Acceptance was his key to liberation. If there ever was anyone who came to AA by mistake, it was I. I just didn't belong here. Never in my wildest moments had it occurred to me that I might like to be an alcoholic. Never once had my mother even hinted at the idea that, when I grew up, I might like to be president of AA. Not only did I not think that being an alcoholic was a good idea, I didn't even feel that I had all that much of a drinking problem.
All right, so real quick, can everybody identify with that? Has anybody in their life said, when I get older, I'm going to wind up in treatment? No. The lifestyle I grew up in, I was pretty sure jail was on its way. Like, it was just a matter of time. But never did I think I'd wind up in treatment. Never. Let alone 6 times. Go ahead.
Of course, I had problems, all sorts of problems. If you had my problems, you drink too, was my feeling. My major problems were marital. If you had been my wife, you drink too. Max and I had been married for 28 years when I ended up in AA. It started out as a good marriage, but it deteriorated over the years as she progressed through the various stages of qualifying for Al-Anon. At first, she would say, "You don't love me. Why don't you admit it?" Later, she would say, "You don't like me. Why don't you admit it?" As her disease was reaching the terminal stages, she was screaming, "You hate me. You hate me. Why don't you admit you hate me?" So I admitted it. I remember very well saying, "There's only one person in the world whose guts I hate worse than yours, and those are my own." She cried a bit and went to bed. That was the only answer to my problems that she had left. I cried a bit, then mixed myself another drink. Today, we don't have to live like that anymore. Max had gotten that way because I didn't care. Indeed, it seemed that I cared too much. I had sent her to 4 consecutive psychiatrists, and not one of them had gotten me sober. I also sent my kids to psychiatrists. I remember one time...
Real quick, if he's sending her and the kids to psychiatrists, basically what's he saying?
It's their
Something's
problem.
wrong with them.
Can't be me, right?
Yeah.
It must be them, which
Yeah.
definitely is denial. Like I said, really pay attention to this guy's denial. It's heavy. Go ahead.
I remember one time, even the dog had a psychiatric diagnosis. I yelled at Max, "What do you mean? The dog just needs more love." "You tell that dumb cat dog doctor he's not a Beverly Hills psychiatrist. All I want to know is, why does that dog wet my lap every time I hold him? The dog hasn't wet my pants once since I joined AA, and neither have I." The harder I worked with Max, the sicker she got. So when it ended up at a psycho ward, I wasn't all that surprised. But then, when that steel door slammed shut and she was the one that went home, I truly was amazed. I had begun to drink in the early years of pharmacy school in order to get to sleep. After going to school all day, working in family drugstore all evening, then studying until 1 or 2 in the morning, I would not be able to sleep soundly, but everything I had been studying going around in my head. I would be half asleep and half awake, and in the morning I would be both tired and stupid. Then I found a solution. At the end of study time, I would drink 2 beers, jump in bed, sleep real fast, and wake up smart. I drank my way through schools and always got honors. And as I went through pharmacy school, graduate school, medical school, internship, residency, and specialty training, and finally went into practice, my drinking kept increasing. But I thought it was because my responsibilities were increasing. If you had my responsibilities, if you needed to sleep like I do, you'd drink too. My drinking took place after work hours. I remember finding myself in the middle of the night in the doctor's parking lot at the hospital with one foot in the car and one foot on the ground, not knowing which was the lead foot, and finding myself hanging up the telephone, then realizing I had gotten out of bed, answered the phone, turned on the light, and carried on a conversation with a patient. I didn't know whether I had told him to rush to the hospital and I'd meet him there, or to take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. With a problem like that, I couldn't go back to sleep, so I'd sit up, watch old Wallace Berry movies all night on all-night TV, and drink. The longer the drinking continued, the shorter the time the alcohol would keep me asleep. I would have to drink myself back to sleep again and again throughout the night, but I never became a morning drinker. Instead, I had a 5 a.m. shut-off time.
Well, let me ask you something. Why do you think he was the guy that would never be a morning drinker?
Well, he had a job to do.
And also, don't we do stuff like that so we can say, well, I'm not
I'm not an alcoholic.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, it's bullshit, but
Yeah.
that's what keeps us in that denial.
No, he's not able to sleep because the drinking is messing with his sleep rhythm.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's the one thing that heroin or opiates, and alcohol are a lot alike. Your tolerance constantly rises, and you need more. Physically dependent, you need more
Yeah.
to sleep. I used to have to wake up in the middle of the night, take a pill or do something just to go. I mean, I would wake up sick. You know what it is, right? Yeah, and it's like, yeah, just to go back to sleep, and then you go back to sleep and you wake up again on fire.
Another shot.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
I would have to drink myself back to sleep again and again throughout the night, but I never became a morning drinker. 5 a.m. shut-off time. If it was 1 minute before 5, I'd drink myself back to sleep. If it was 1 minute after, I'd stay up and act like a martyr all day. It became progressively harder to get up in the morning until one day I asked myself what I would do for a patient who felt this rotten. The answer came right back. I'd give him something to pep him up. So immediately I started taking and shooting pep pills. Eventually I was taking 45 milligrams of a long-acting Benzedrine and 45 of the short-acting just to get out of bed in the morning. I took more through the day to increase the high and more to maintain it. When I overshot the mark, I'd take tranquilizers to level off. The pep pills affected my hearing at times. I couldn't listen fast enough to hear what I was saying. I wonder why I'm saying that again. I've already said it 3 times. Still, I couldn't turn my mouth off. For the leveling off process, I just loved intravenous Demerol, but I found it hard to practice good medicine while shooting morphine. Following an injection, I would have to keep one hand busy scratching my constantly itching nose and also have sudden uncontrollable urges to vomit. I never got much effect out of codeine and Percodan and the tranquilizers. However, for a period of time, I was injecting pentothal intravenously to put myself to sleep. That's the stuff used when oral surgeons puts the needle in your vein and says, count to 10. And before you get to 2, you're asleep. Instant blackout was what it was, and it seemed delightful. I didn't feel I could lie in bed and squirt the stuff in my veins while my kids and wife stood around watching me, so I kept the drug in my bag and the bag in the car, and the car in the garage. Luckily, the garage was attached to the house. In the garage, I would put the needle in my vein and then try to figure out exactly how much medication to inject to overcome the pep pills while adding to the sleeping pills while ignoring the tranquilizers in order to get just enough to be able to pull out the needle, jerk the tourniquet, throw it in the car, slam the door shut, run down the hall, and fall into bed before I fell asleep.
Now, normally
Jesus
someone
Christ.
drug use like this, you have to know you're a drug addict, right? Or there's a problem. But the fact that you think that he's a doctor, you think that kind of feeds his denial?
Yes.
Because what comes with being a doctor, for the most part, right?
Intelligence.
Ego, maybe.
Ego,
Like, I'm a doctor,
yeah.
right? Like, so, and you heard what he said before, too, about if you had my problems, you drink. If you had my responsibilities, you drink, too. So here we got the ego and the sense of entitlement, right? Well, I'm a doctor. So that right there, the ego and the sense of entitlement is feeding this denial all over the place. It's pretty easy to stay in denial when you're a doctor, you're taking care of things, you're holding up the family household, you're paying bills, you're doing all this, and here he is, like he's doing pet pills, which is almost like Adderall, whatever it was back then, Adderall, intravenous Demerol, and he's drinking all the time. That's crazy, right? It's crazy. I mean, just the stuff that he's doing right here, just all that stuff that he has to do, that sodium pentothal stuff, like, that's the stuff they use to give you surgery, oral surgery. And he's doing it just so they could run up in bed, fall asleep. I mean, it's insane, but we could look at how many of us do this type of juggling to keep our drug addiction or alcoholism going.
Mhm.
You know, a lot of this stuff, I mean, now this is an extreme case, but still, if you look at the types of patterns, this is the stuff that we do on a regular basis, having a drink. Who has to hide liquor in a few different places in the house, right? All the stories, the lies that we tell people so that we can go and drink. Good.
It was hard to judge the right amount. One night I had to put myself back to sleep 3 times, and then I finally decided to give up. But to do so, I had to get all the stuff out of the house and out of my possession. In the end, I had to do the same with alcohol and all pills. I wasn't quite able to quit chemicals as long as they were in the house. If they were around, I always found a need for them, especially the pills. I never in my life took a tranquilizer, sedative, or pet pill because I was a pill head. I always took it because I had a symptom that only a pill would relieve.
All right, so isn't that more
Denial.
more justifying, right? Like, oh, I'm not a drug addict, but that's the stuff we tell ourselves. Or I'm not a morning drinker, so I'll drink before 5 o'clock. Is that not the morning?
Mhm.
Yeah, but if you set these types of things from them and you follow them, you're able to justify or rationalize this, and you can say to yourself, because a normal person would see this and be like, you're crazy. But we'll say it to ourselves and we'll follow it and it'll make sense to ourselves, even though it doesn't make sense. But that's the crazy part of this whole thing. That's where, when it says step 2, we could be brought, what does it say? Step 2, read step 2 for me.
Came to believe that power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity.
Which obviously, if we have to be restored to sanity, obviously we will what?
Insane.
Yeah, crazy, insane, delusional. So here's the delusional part of the disease, the denial that's just running wild with him. But as he's in it, it makes perfect sense to him. Good.
Therefore, every pill was medically indicated at the time it was taken. For me, pills don't produce the desire to swallow a pill. They produce the symptoms that require that the pill be taken for relief. As a physician and pharmacist who had grown up in a drugstore home, I had a pill for every ill, and I was sick a lot.
Guys, do you think our bodies do this, whether it's drugs or alcohol? Do you think our bodies set ourselves up for stuff like this?
No.
Oh, it definitely does. It definitely does. You'll be out in the world and all you'll want to do is drink, but you're pretending or you're saying to yourself, I don't want to drink. So you never wind up like just being.
You meant like you're supposed to have it.
No, like you'll wind up starting a fight with a significant other, or like you'll be around the kids, or you'll be just around anybody, and all of a sudden you'll be restless, irritable, discontent, anxious, angry, nervous, whatever it is. All of a sudden, all you do is a drink. And it's like your brain knows that if you get to a certain heightened state of frustration or whatever it is, that you'll usually have that drink, your brain subconsciously will set you up to feel that way so that you have a drink. Listen, you ask anybody that's ever been addicted to painkillers or heroin, especially painkiller people. They're not on painkillers. All of a sudden, their back or their neck or whatever it was that was really hurting, all of a sudden, oh man, I really need this pill. When really, it's the brain telling you your back hurts. You know what I mean? It won't be an unbearable back pain, but it knows that if your back hurts, that you'll reach for this thing. Do you understand what I'm saying? So that's what he's talking about right here, that it's almost the mind fuck. All right, good.
Today, I find I can't work my AA program while taking pills, nor may I even have them around for dire emergencies only. I can't say thy will be done and take a pill. I can't say I'm powerless over alcohol, but solid alcohol is okay. I can't say God could restore me to sanity, but until he does, I'll control myself with pills. Giving up alcohol alone was not enough for me. I had to give up all mood and mind-affecting chemicals in order to stay sober and comfortable. On 2 occasions over weekends, I had decided I would take absolutely nothing.
All right, so now this is the part I really want you to see how crazy this guy is a doctor, right? He must have passed the bar exam. So at one point he was a doctor. I know the bar exams for lawyers, but so he must be pretty smart, right?
Yeah.
But this guy's a doctor. So here he goes. I'm going to spoil the story a little bit and let him read it. For 2 different times he decides not to drink, right? And then he goes into detox and has seizures. And when he goes to the hospital, in his mind, it can't be the alcohol because I had nothing to drink. Go ahead.
On each occasion, I had a convulsion on Sunday morning. Both times, my reaction was that I had had nothing to drink the night before, so obviously alcohol had nothing to do with it. The neurologist in charge of my case didn't think to ask me whether I drank, and I didn't think to tell him. As a result, he couldn't figure out why I had the convulsions, and he decided to send me to the Mayo Clinic. It seemed to me I needed a consultation first. I happened to be the best diagnostician I knew at the time, and certainly I knew my case better than anyone else. So I sat down with me and went over the facts behind the convulsions. Personality changes, daily headaches, sense of impending doom, senses of impending insanity. Suddenly it was obvious to me I had a brain tumor and I would die, and everyone would be sorry for me. The Mayo Clinic seemed like a good place to have my diagnosis confirmed. After 9 days of tests at Mayo, I was put in the locked ward of all places.
Why do you think they did that?
They put him where?
In the lock, they locked him.
no brain tumor.
Well, he had no brain tumor, and he must be crazy because I'm pretty sure, I don't know this, it doesn't say in the story, but I'm pretty sure while they're talking to him and they're going through this stuff and they're realizing he's lying, they're talking to his wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're asking his wife, and his wife's like, he's an alcoholic and he didn't drink. And here he is, bold-faced lying to them, like, no, I don't drink, I don't do this. They're like, this guy really must be crazy. You know what I mean? So what else was there to do but put him in the psych ward? Good.
That's when that steel door slammed shut, and Max was the one who went home. I didn't like being on the nut ward, and I particularly didn't like being forced to ice cookies on Christmas Eve. So I raised enough fuss that they finally agreed to let me sign out against medical advice. Max accepted responsibility for me after I had promised never to drink again, never to take another pill, and never to swear again.
Hold on, so when you think he told her that, do you think he was being truthful with her?
Oh, hell no.
At the time though.
Absolutely.
At the time,
I believe,
oh,
yeah, at the
Oh,
time,
okay.
he's like, I'll stop this, I'll stop, like, because I've done that before, I'll be good. Like, that's basically what I was saying, I'll be good.
And
And
honestly, no.
I really believed it. I really believed it. I just didn't know being good for forever wasn't really an option. You know what I mean?
I didn't believe it.
But at the
I
time,
said it, but I didn't believe
yeah,
it.
and I did though. And I, listen, there's that too. Some of us will tell everybody what we need to tell them so we can get the hell out of there and do what we want.
Exactly.
And then some of us are really being truthful. Like, that's it. I'll be good. I'll never have another drink again. I'll never talk to any other women. And watch how fast he goes against that. Go ahead.
Never take another pill, never swear again, and never talk to girls again. We got on the plane and immediately had a big fight over whether I'd drink the free booze. Max won, I didn't drink it. But by God, I wouldn't talk or eat either.
Oh.
And that was how Max and I and our 2 daughters spent Christmas Day 8 years ago.
Wait, listen, but isn't that like us though? Yeah, exactly. We are pissed. We heard the word no, and we're going to make everybody pay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When we got home, I had a bottle of scotch and went to bed. The next day, Max called the neurologist and told him about the Mayo psychiatrist's opinion. He arranged for me to see a local psychiatrist who quickly decided I should be in the mental health unit of our local hospital. People there insisted on putting me in a ward when Max and I both knew I ought to have a private room. Finally, she asked, "Do you realize he's on the staff at this hospital?" And I got my private room.
Wait, so why should he get a private room? Why?
His stuff, man.
He's already put people in there.
Well, he's a doctor. How dare you? Don't you know who I think I am? I should get my private room. Well, that's what it is. And like I said, that's that sense of entitlement and ego, which feeds the denial. If he would really look at what's going on, he might have a better chance of if he really looked at the solution, he might have a lot better chance at meeting the problem. But instead, he's all sense of entitlement and ego and denial, and he can't really face the fact, the real fact of what's going on because he's not looking at it the right way. Good.
Time went by very, very slowly on my second nut ward. I never could quite get the knack of it and kept asking myself, what's a nice guy like me doing in a place like this? They wanted me to make leather belts of all things. Had I gone to school all those years just to sit and make leather belts? Besides, I couldn't understand the instructions. The girl had explained them to me 4 times, and I was too embarrassed to ask her again. I am pleased to state, however, that I had gone to only a very few AA meetings before I was able to make a really beautiful pair of moccasins and half of a wallet. I wore those moccasins every night for the next 7 years until they wore out. For my 7th AA birthday, my program-orientated Al-Anon wife had my moccasins bronzed. Now I own perhaps the most costly pair of moccasins that anyone has ever seen, and they help me remember where I've been. In the hospital, I hung on to the idea I'd had most of my life, that if I could just control
This is serious stuff here. Listen to this. Good.
I hung on to the idea I had most of my life, that if I could just control the external environment, the internal environment would then become comfortable.
How many of us were under the impression that as long as it looked good, it had to be good, right? I got a good job, got a nice house, wife, paid bills, this, that. It all looks good. But inside, I know for me, inside, I was a train wreck, whatever you want to call it. Inside, I was not good. But on the outside, it looked good. So if my neighbor, if somebody would have asked my neighbor, hey man, how's Mike doing? He said, yeah, he's good, man, he's good. You know what I mean? But inside, not good. Inside, drowning, going crazy, a nut. But on the outside, and I like how he said, if I can control the external, then the internal would be good. And that's not how life is. Okay.
Much of my time was spent writing letters, notes, orders, and lists of things for Max, who was also my office nurse, to do to keep the world running while I was locked up. One has to be pretty sick to do that, and perhaps one has to be even sicker to come back every day for a new list as she did. Today we don't have to live that way. Max still works for me in the office, but we have turned our wills and our lives over to the work, and our work over to the care of God, each with the other as a witness. We took the 3rd step out loud, just as it says in the big book. And life keeps getting simpler and easier as we try to reverse my old idea by taking care of the internal environment via the 12 steps and letting the external environment take care of itself.
And you know what he means by that? And this is what I say all the time. If you leave here and you take care of your spiritual, physical, and mental health, right? Like I told you, when I went to treatment, they said, Mike, you need to do this for yourself. And I'd say, that doesn't make sense to me. Because when I live for myself, I'm not in treatment, right? So going to meetings and working the steps and doing everything, somewhere between month 5 and 6, I had this epiphany, this spiritual awakening. The better I take care of myself, the better I am for everybody else. You know what I mean? So the better I take care of my spiritual, physical, and mental health, the easier life becomes. That was a lesson that I learned, and like what we were talking about before, Brent, what you were saying, like what your goal was, that's what it was. When I realized that, the better I take care of myself, the easier other things become, the better I am for them. Oh man. So now.
I said this with Amy the other day. It's like when you're in the airplane and put on your mask.
Yes, exactly. And that's the thing. The better you take, and really, the better you take care of the internal, the easier the external gets. It's not about taking care of the external and then this feels better. That's, I think, what we've been taught, or the information that we were given and we kind of went with our whole entire life. I mean, listen, how many human beings, people in the United States, people around the world, are convinced that if they get what they want, or if they, you know what I mean, if they check these boxes, everything will be good. And there's so many people out there, the boxes are checked, and this, you know, if you look what their life looks on Facebook, it looks great.
Yeah, on paper, my life is great.
Yeah, but really, what is it? You know what I mean? Like, is it really, are you really, really happy? They say happiness is an inside job. Happiness comes from within. When I used to hear people say that, I had no clue what they meant, because I wasn't. Now I understand. Now I truly get it. I didn't then. The better I am for everybody, like the better I am, the better I take care of myself, the better I am for you. The better I can be for you, the better I feel about myself. Holy shit. It's like a complete reversal of the way I used to look at things. Listen, my first drug of choice as a kid was fantasy. I used to fantasize about how I wanted things to be. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that fantasy broke down to one thing. As long as I can do what I want, when I want, and I don't have to hear it from nobody, how could I not be happy? I was literally like a 5-year-old my whole entire life. That didn't mean I didn't know how to take care of responsibilities and pay bills and show up when I was supposed to. But that core fundamental belief, if I can do what I want when I want, I'll be happy, that's really the way I based my whole entire life on. If I wanted to go on a trip, I went on a trip. If I wanted to buy a car, I bought a car. If I wanted to do things, you know what I mean? If I wanted to, and I just did what I wanted. And I did what I wanted for so long, it completely started pushing all the people away that I was trying to bring close. And the truth is, at one point, especially for a long time, I actually wanted them to be pushed away because I was completely isolated and I knew that I didn't even deserve to have them around me. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the thing was, it wasn't until I started living life for other people. I wish we had the third step prayer here. And it really, we could just read it right now, but I don't have it with me. Do you have it? Like,
Yeah,
read,
Mark.
because he said before, he said, me and Max, we sat down and we took the third step prayer, just like it says in the book. Because the third step prayer to me was a complete reversal of how I was living my life. Please, go ahead, read it. Go ahead, you read it, because I can't see it.
God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Because whose will was I doing?
Yours.
Mine. And here's the thing. You ask me, Mike, do you believe in God? Yes, I believe in God. I'm just the God of everything else. You know what I mean? I mean, well, because that's the way it was. Yes, I believe, but really, I didn't believe in God. Even though, see, the thing is, what kind of God did I believe in? Because I didn't think God believed in me. And I didn't act as if there was a God. Although, actually, the lifestyle I lived, I had a God of my understanding then. I was kind of convinced that as long as I did more good than bad, that I'd be allowed into heaven. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how I was going. So it was like, as long as I didn't do any real crazy shit, murders and all this other stuff, like, yeah, I break the law and I sell this and I do that and I lie, and, but I mean, listen, I actually really believed that my lies were doing people favors.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I would lie to the women in my life, my wife, my ex-wife now, my sister, my mother, because I would just try to make them not worry. So I would lie to them, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I was convinced that my lying was actually to do good. Everything that I did was a justification and a lie. And like I said before, it was all so that I could do what I want and when I want it. And I really believe that most people are operating on the fact that if they get what they want, they'll be happy. And it's really, I know for me, it just wasn't true. It wasn't true. I never got what I wanted and was as happy as I thought I was gonna be when I thought, do you understand what I'm saying? It was always the thought of it that, the chase. Like, I wanted to buy a house so bad. I bought a house when I was like 22, 23. I was convinced that once I bought that house, I'd be good. Well, I bought the house and I was like, well, now what? You know what I mean? It was always, if I can get to here, I'll be good. And then I get to here, and it was always here. It was never enough. I never was happy and content and just comfortable in my own skin. It wasn't until I got clean and worked the steps that I even got halfway there. Good.
One day I sat there in the hospital. My psychiatrist walked up behind me and asked, how'd you like to talk to the man from AA? My reaction was that I'd already helped all the patients on the ward, and I still had plenty of problems of my own without trying to help some drunk from AA. But by the look on the psychiatrist's face, I could tell that it would really make him happy if I agreed. So for no better reason than to make him happy, I agreed. Very shortly, I realized that that had been a mistake. When this big clown came bounding into the room, almost shouting, "My name's Frank, and I'm an alcoholic, ha ha ha." I really felt sorry for him. The only thing in life he had to brag about was the fact that he was an alcoholic. It wasn't until later that he told me he was an attorney. Against my better judgment, I went to a meeting with him that night, and a strange thing began to happen. The psychiatrist, who had generally been ignoring me, now became quite interested.
Why did he become interested in him?
He was a test subject.
Well, he started to live in the solution instead of the problem, right? Like, now he's actually doing something. And did you hear what he said before about, he's like, the psychiatrist wanted him to go to AA, and he's like, man, I've already helped everybody. Now you want me to go help the people at AA? Like, that's how clueless and in denial he still is. He thinks AA, like, it can't be for me.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this guy's been in a psych ward, and for the second or third time, I can't remember. And yeah. I mean, could you imagine who's in treatment for the second time? Okay, could you imagine if you went in here going, man, this is just a waste of my time, I'm just here. You know what I mean? Like, do you wonder how clueless we would think you were?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, you're in here, you're in a treatment center. Like, you have to take a break out of your life to come here even for the first time, whatever, like, if you don't realize on your first time that things are pretty bad, that you have a like, you know, I've never seen anybody come in here, for the most part, and say, no, man, I got no problem, this is just, I'm just here to check out the food and the beds. You know, but this guy, I mean, he's really, like, do you see, is it me, or like, do you see how, you know, clueless he is? Good. Yeah.
Every day he would ask me all kinds of questions about the AA meetings. At first I wondered whether he was alcoholic himself and was sending me to find out about AA. But it quickly became obvious that he had this
See how
child...
suspicious we are? He thinks, you know what I mean? He's like, oh, I think he's an alcoholic. He wants me to go scope it out for him. It's crazy. Go ahead.
It quickly became obvious that he had this childish notion instead. If he could get me to go to enough meetings while in the hospital, I would continue to go after he let me out. So for no better reason than to fool him, I asked Frank to take me to a meeting every night. And Frank did set me up for a meeting every night, except Friday, when he thought he might have a date with his girlfriend. That's a devil of a way to run an organization, I thought, and I reported Frank to the psychiatrist, who didn't seem perturbed. He just got someone else to take me on Fridays. Eventually, the psychiatrist discharged me from the hospital, and Max and I began to go to meetings ourselves. Right from the start, I felt that they weren't doing anything for me, but they were sure helping Max. We sat in the back and talked only to each other. It was precisely a year before I spoke at an AA meeting. Although we enjoyed the laughter in the early days, I heard lots of things that I thought were stupid. I interpreted sober as meaning drinking but not being drunk. When a big, healthy-looking young fellow stood up there and said, I'm a success today if I don't drink today, I thought, man, I've got 1,000 things to do today before I can brag about not taking a drink, for God's sakes. Of course, I was still drinking at the time. Today, there is absolutely nothing in the world more important to me than keeping this alcoholic sober. Not taking a drink is by far the most important thing I do each day.
Why is that? Why do you think? I said it before. The most important thing for him to do is to not drink. Because with that is sobriety, right? And if he's sober, he can do those other things. He'll say it in a little bit, like he couldn't believe how many of his problems just went away just by getting sober. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, good.
It seems that all they talked about at meetings was drinking, drinking, drinking. It made me thirsty. I wanted to talk about my many big problems. Drinking seemed a small one, and I knew that giving up one drink for one day wouldn't really do any good. Finally, after 7 months, I decided to try it. To this day, I'm amazed how many of my problems, most of which had nothing to do with drinking, I believed, have become manageable or have simply disappeared since I quit drinking. I had already given up all the narcotics, most of the pills, and some of the alcohol when I first came to AA. By early July, I had tapered off alcohol completely and got off all pills in the ensuing few months. When the compulsion to drink left, it was relatively easy to stay off alcohol. But for some time, it was difficult to keep from taking a pill when I had an appropriate symptom, such as a cough, pain, anxiety, insomnia, a muscle spasm, or an upset stomach. It has gotten progressively easier. Today, I feel I have used up my right to chemical peace of mind. It helped me a great deal to become convinced that alcoholism was a disease, not a moral issue, that I had been drinking as a result of a compulsion, even though I had not been aware of the compulsion at the time.
All right, so what step do you think that one was? The acceptance that this was a disease and that he was drinking from a moral compulsion, that it wasn't a moral issue, that he was actually sick.
You want to step one?
Yes, it's step one. That's why it's crazy to me. Like, I really think if you do a real step one, the rest of them, like when people tell me like they're worried about step 4 or step 9, this, that, I'm like, if you really internalize and accept the fact that you have a disease that's going to kill you, that shit seems like light work. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And like I say all the time, like if you're worried about some of the, like obviously if there's statute of limitations and stuff like that, stuff that you're worried about, talk about with a priest. You know what I mean? Like you might not want to share that with a sponsor. There's stuff that you can share with a priest or whatever. But man, just go to some meetings and find a guy for the most part or a woman that's had a rougher life than you. know what I mean? And then just talk to them. It should not be, if you're trying to save your life, like you'll hear, you cannot save your ass and your face at the same time. And we're in here, we're trying to save our asses. Like, if you don't believe this is a life or death thing, then you're not really, you haven't done a step one. You haven't really accepted how serious this is. Good.
I had not been aware of the compulsion at the time, and that sobriety was not a matter of willpower. The people of AA had something that looked much better than what I had, but I was afraid to let go of what I had in order to try something new. There was a certain sense of security in the familiar.
Anybody ever hear the devil you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because here's the thing. This is what you guys don't really grasp sometimes. It's the only way you know. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like this right here, like when you're in here, it's the only way you know. So to try and do something different, well it's like, well, why try something different if it's going to wind up, you know what I mean? Like, because a lot of times we don't actually believe in the fact that there's a better way. That's why I tried to push it so hard. That's why I try to explain it to you the way I explain it to you, because there really is a better way, and it's infinitely better than the way you were living. Good.
At last, acceptance proved to be the key to my drinking problem. After I had been around AA for 7 months, tapering off alcohol and pills, not finding the program working very well, I was finally able to say, okay, God, it is true that I, of all people, strange as it may seem, and even though I didn't give my permission, really am an alcoholic of sorts, and it's all right with me. Now, what am I going to do about it? When I stopped living in the problem and began living in the answer, the problem went away. From that moment on, I have not had a single compulsion to drink. And acceptance is the answer to all my problems today. When I am disturbed, it is because I find some person, place, thing, or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me. And I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing, happens in God's world by mistake. Until I could accept my alcoholism, I could not stay sober. Unless I accepted life completely on life terms, I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and in my attitudes.
All right, so real quick. I always break that whole prayer down to life is not about if, it's about is. How many times, for how long have we gone through life going, man, if they would just do this, it'd be fine. If I just had this, it'd be fine. If I could just do this, if you know what I mean? Life's not, yeah, but life's not about if, it's about is. So however it is, if we deal with it the best way we can, it's a lot easier. And here's the thing. Way before we were drug addicts and alcoholics, we were control freaks. We tried to get everything to go our way. We were living in that if. We were trying, we were like, what do they say? The director of the play. We want everybody to do everything we wanted to do. You know what I mean? That's a lot of anxiety and stress and time and work, right? Like, I don't know for you, but for me, it's just, we were talking about this before. It's just a lot easier to let it be the way it is. You know what I mean? It goes against our nature to try to control everything and manipulate everything and fix everything. But
What we want, when we want.
yeah, and how has that been working out for us? How much of the times when we get what we want, is it what we thought we wanted? You know what I mean? Almost never. It's never as good as we think it's going to be.
No.
That's the thing. I mean, let's look at the facts. Let's look at all the times we did that. And really, it was never what we thought it was going to be. So let go of that shit. I love that let go and let God. Like, that's almost like a step 3 breakdown. Let go and let God. And that's basically what he just said. Like, just let it go, man. It's so much easier to just deal with the way things are instead of trying to make it the way we want to make it. Good.
Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. He forgot to mention that I was the chief critic. I was able to see the flaw in every person, every situation.
How many of us are that? How many of us are that, especially when we're in our addiction? I tell people all the time, and you got to be careful when you leave here and you're trying to stay sober. When you get to a point where everybody in the world's a fucking idiot except you, it's dangerous territory to be on. You know what I mean? This one, fuck that. You go to a restaurant, everybody's under your skin. Because here's the thing, it's not them, and they might suck in certain ways, but at the same time, like, you don't want to be in that mindset. When you're in that mindset, you are headed for a relapse. Good.
Oh. There did I?
Sorry.
And I was always glad to point it out because I knew you wanted perfection, just as I did. AA and acceptance have taught me that there's a bit of good in the worst of us and a bit of bad in the best of us. That we are all children of God and we have a right to be here. When I complain about me or about you, I'm complaining about God's handiwork.
All right, so Brent, weren't you saying that before, how you really accept people for who they are?
Mm-hmm.
And here's the whole thing. If we're that negative person that's pointing everything out and with this and with that, what type of energy are we putting in the world?
Negative.
Oh, man. For the most part, people don't want to be around. You know what I mean? Like, oh, gee, you're like Debbie Downer from Saturday Night Live, right? You know what I mean? Like, just bringing that shit on. Yeah, exactly. Man, none of it matters. None of it matters. Be the person, because I try to be. Be the person that lifts people up, gives people a compliment, brings light and energy and positivity in the air. Those are the people like to open the door when you show up. You know what I mean? It's the other people, like the way you used to be. People are like, oh, Jesus.
Don't
You know what I
come on
mean?
my property no more.
Go ahead.
I'm saying that I know better than God. For years, I was sure the worst thing that could happen to a nice guy like me would be that I would turn out to be an alcoholic. Today, I find it's the best thing that has ever happened to me. This proves I don't know what's good for me. And if I don't know what's good for me, then I don't know what's good or bad for you or for anyone. So I'm better off I don't give advice and I don't figure out what's best and just accept life on life's terms as it is today, especially my own life as it actually is. Before AA, I judged myself by my intentions while the world was judging me by my actions.
Ooh. How many of us do that? And how do we judge other people? On their actions.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You said you were going to do this. I can't believe you. You know, we'll take people to court quick, right? Like, we'll hold them to, you know, I can't believe you did that. When we're going around like, well, you know, we're falling short on a regular basis and want everybody to cut us some slack because that wasn't our intentions.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the way it is. You get judged by your actions, not by your intentions. Good.
Acceptance has been the answer to my marital problems. It's as though AA gave me a new pair of glasses. Max and I have been married now for 35 years. Prior to our marriage, she was a shy, scrawny adolescent. I was able to see things in her that others couldn't necessarily see. Things like beauty, charm, gaiety, and a gift for being easy to talk to, a sense of humor, and many other fine qualities. It was as if I had rather a Midas touch, which turned everything to gold, a magnifying mind that magnified whatever it focused on. Over the years, as I thought about Max, her good qualities grew and grew, and we married. And all these qualities became more and more apparent to me, and we were happier and happier. But then, as I drank more and more, the alcohol seemed to affect my vision. Instead of continuing to see what was good about my wife, I began to see her defects. The more I focused my mind on her defects, the more they grew and multiplied. Every defect I pointed out to her became greater and greater. Each time I told her she was a nothing, she receded a little more into nowhere. The more I drank, the more she wilted. Then, one day in AA, I was told that I had the lenses in my glasses backwards. The courage to change in the serenity prayer meant not that I should change my marriage, but rather that I should change myself and learn to accept my spouse as she was. AA has given me a new pair of glasses. I can again focus on my wife's good qualities and watch them grow and grow and grow. I can do the same thing with an AA meeting. The more I focus my mind on its defects, late start, long drunk-alongs, cigarette smoke, the worse the meeting becomes. But when I try to see what I can add to the meeting rather than what I can get out of it, and when I focus my mind on what's good about it rather than what's wrong with it, the meeting keeps getting better and better. When I focus on what's good today, I have a good day. When I focus on what's bad, I have a bad day. If I focus on a problem, the problem increases. If I focus on the answer increases. Today, Max and I try to communicate what we feel rather than what we think. We used to argue about our differing ideas, but we can't argue about our feelings. I can tell her she ought to think a certain way, and certainly I don't take her right to feel however she does feel. When we deal in feelings, we tend to become to know ourselves and each other much better. It hasn't been easy to work out this relationship with Max. On the contrary, the hardest place to work this program has been in my own home.
Why do you think that the hardest place to work this program is going to be in your own home and with your family and the closest
Those are
relationships?
the people you deal with on a regular basis.
Yes.
Because the dynamic, the relationship dynamic has existed for as long as you know them.
Yep.
Mhm.
So it's like, you know, even when you go and you start getting better and, you know, she says A, it's like you instinctively say B. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Or say you say A and you switch it up and you say whatever. Like, say you start acting different. They'll notice you acting different and it kind of messes them up. And they might even try to... It's crazy how this thing goes. A lot of times we go, we get clean, we get better, and we heal, and the people around us are still sick. and us getting better, it throws them off. Do you understand what I'm saying? So sometimes you might be dealing with stuff. Now, the thing is, you just got to hold the course and do what it is, and once they see you're consistent, it kind of plays out. But you got to be careful with that, because sometimes on a subconscious level, they'll almost try to bring the old you out of you because that dynamic has existed so long.
They're used to.
Yeah, they're used to it. I mean, it's learned behavior, it's patterns. In case you guys don't know, that's what this whole thing is about. Learning your learned behavior and your negative patterns and everything, and trying to reverse them and do the opposite and learn to live differently. Good.
The hardest place to work this program has been in my own home, with my own children, and finally with Max. It seems I should have learned to love my wife and family first. The newcomer to AA last, but it was the other way around. Eventually I had to redo each of the 12 steps specifically with Max in mind, from the first saying, I am powerless over alcohol and my home life has become unmanageable by me, to the 12th, which I tried to think of her as a sick Al-Anon and treat her with the love I would give a sick AA newcomer. When I do this, we get along fine. Perhaps the best thing of all for me is to remember that my serenity is inversely proportional to my expectations. The higher my expectations of Max and other people are, the lower is my serenity. I can watch my serenity level rise when I discard my expectations. But then my rights to try to move in, and they too can force my serenity level down. I have to discard my rights as well as my expectations by asking myself, how important is it really? How important is it compared to my serenity, my emotional sobriety? And when I place more value on my serenity and sobriety than on anything else, I can maintain them at a higher level, at least for the time being. Acceptance is the key to my relationship with God today. I never just sit and do nothing while waiting for Him to tell me what to do. Rather, I do whatever is in front of me to be done, and I leave the results up to Him.
Doesn't that sound like getting up and doing what you're supposed to do instead of getting up and doing what you want to do? He gets up, takes care of responsibilities, does what he does, and whatever comes through his path, he handles it in a way where he puts others first. Good.
However it turns out, that's God's will for me. I must keep my magic magnifying mind on my acceptance and off my expectations, for my serenity is directly proportional to my level of acceptance. When I remember this, I can see I've never had it so good. Thank God for AA.
And I like what he said, that I've never had it so good. Because now he's looking at the way life is instead of if. Max, he looks at Max's good qualities instead of where she falls short. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like when you look, even us right now, whatever you guys got going on in your world, if you look at the blessings and not the way because life is not about if, it's about is. Life is the way it is, not the way I would have it. If we are trying to make things perfect, if we're worried about what they say or do or this, if I have this, if I have that, you never get to really enjoy what's right in front of you. How many people in here truly have people who love them and support them on the outside? Some people don't. Do you understand what I'm saying? Some people don't. Some people don't have a place to go, a job, any family, anything. Some people are seriously ill. You know what I mean? Like every single one of us has a gift right now. Like right now, things are not that big. Honestly, things are really good. We're in this treatment center. It's a good treatment center. If we look at the gifts, if we look at the blessings, if we look at what's good, then we realize we've never had it so good. If you look at what's missing, you'll never, you know what I mean? If you're looking at what's missing in your life instead of what you got, it's going to be a never-ending cycle, whatever. And I was only going to do half the story now and half the story later or whatever, but I seen we were kind of moving on it, so I wanted to finish now. 6 o'clock group, we're going to do a group discussion on self-esteem, and then maybe even we can play some music and laugh and joke and talk. If anybody's I got a little speaker. If anybody wants to play some music, I'd really rather not play like crazy shit. Like maybe just
some fun.
Just make it a song that has some meaningful stuff in it, and maybe you know what I'm saying.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll talk about self-esteem and we'll talk about some other stuff. And thank you guys for paying attention. And the only reason why I called you over here is because he was in that story. They were talking about a thing about expectations and his serenity is a direct proportion to his expectations. Basically saying like, if I'm not expecting everything to be perfect, you know what I mean? Like if I keep my expectations low, then I can never get let down. All right, guys, thank you so much.
But,
Go ahead.
what was her name, Sarah, that did her testimony the other day? Or-
I
I
think
think
it
it
was,
was, she had the visual with the bowl and the bigger bowl expectations versus what they offer.
Yeah.
That was kind of,
Yeah.
because that kind of put it, I could see it.